Jonny, we're here today playing snow rugby.
Yeah.
What are the kind of extra difficulties or abnormal difficulties that playing in these conditions put on the body?
Do you know what? My first go, it's been a while since I've played, so it's difficult to say, but it did feel like being up this high, there wasn't that much air.
Yeah.
So you do find yourself a bit out of breath, a bit fatigued early on. Also, it's slippy as hell at times in certain areas, not in all areas, and also the ground's not even. So all these things you take for granted, you're suddenly like, geez, you factor that. But what that quickly goes out the window because you just get so engrossed in what's happening around you that you kind of end up forgetting that. You just get on with it and you start slipping around and suddenly you're like, yeah, it's fine.
I had to change out of my rugby boots into ski boots.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
To be able to stay up on my feet, and that was...
I had moulded studs on it, and that was a no-go. My first pass I gave almost ended up on my back. I thought it's going to be a long day, but it was awesome just I then hung on the side of the field that was soft as opposed to the ice. But it's kind of amazing that rugby can be played anywhere as long as you look after each other. And yeah, we got to explore some skills out there yourself as well. So.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about maybe the most extreme conditions that you've ever played in?
I've had some interesting experiences. I mean, I was around for about sort of nigh on sort of 20 years, maybe 18 years, and I played in the snow a lot in Newcastle. We played in snow. We had mornings where the snow was being cleared off the field before we played. So many times we had referees making a decision and we were sat in the change room just sort of like, is it on, is it off, is it on, whatever. I remember one time in Newcastle the wind was so strong that the post snapped in half because of the wind. So being a kicker in that team was always interesting. But also in Toulon as well, we had pre-season games in August that you're playing in 40-degree heat. So I've experienced both ends, but some of it was to do with some of the wind I experienced in Newcastle. I'd probably say two things I'd say that were incredible. One was the wind in Newcastle, where it was not so much about missing touch as to whether you were going to miss the ball when you were kicking. It was because as soon as you dropped it from your hand, it's gone. And the other thing was probably the game we lost in the Grand Slam decided to Scotland in 2000, where the rain came down. And it'll been a long time, so I can't really remember. But absolutely, but I remember at the time just thinking, this is ludicrous. For a Grand Slam deciding game in Scotland at Murrayfield, that I'd never experienced rain like it. It picked that day to have rain where you're thinking, this is heavier than I've ever experienced in my life, let alone on a rugby field. And
how important does teamwork and camaraderie have to be when you encounter extreme conditions such as snow rugby? I think that there's two things that happen, and one has to be a collective decision and the other one has to be individual, and that's just an acceptance of it. It's fine, it is what it is. You sort of say, right, that's the deal, now let's move on, how do we want to play it? If in your head you're sat in the change room and you've got in your mind that I can't wait to go out there, it's going to be too long, we'd go out there and say, it's going to be hot, we're going to play with the ball, it's going to be beautiful. You look out and it starts raining. You have to switch very quickly mindset, and the whole team has to just say, you know what, okay, we're in rainy mode. In the World Cup 2003, we trained all week before the semi-final against France in the warm weather because that's how it was supposed to be, and we had a running game to rival the gods. We were like, this is going to be amazing, and we turned up and it was raining like mad, but the guys sat in the change room and just went, okay, let's get stuck into the rain then. And I think if you resist it and you start thinking, oh geez, I wanted that, you're just slow. It takes you 10 minutes to get into the game. Your decision making's a bit iffy for a while, but if you're just clear as day, and that's what it takes, a bit of clarity, which comes from the whole team just going, right, this is what we got, no point thinking about anything else, let's start with what we've got and let's go make it happen. And that needs to take place inside the mind of the individual and inside the collective mind of the team, and it needs to be pretty sharp. We're 11,000 feet, roughly 11,000 feet above sea level. Lack of oxygen at such a high altitude. What sort of difference does that make to your average performance? Yeah, it's funny. I've been at altitude. We didn't really go hard enough to fully experience it today. But I've been at altitude a few times with whether it be in South Africa or whatever. And even when you're in the gym training on a bike, you just look at the bike. You think, I should be better than this. I did this a week ago in England. And I'm here, and now I'm in South, and I'm giving it everything, and I'm less. But there's it doesn't taste any different. It doesn't feel any different. You just find yourself not able to do it. And again, it comes to that acceptance part. You're just like, right, well, I'm going to be breathing hard, and that's it. But I don't know whether the ball flies further that much.
I never really was that bothered about watching my kicks too much. It either went over, it didn't. I wasn't bothered whether it went over by 20 metres or not. So I hit a few kicks up high, and I guess probably the balls flew a bit more. But I guess, to be honest, most of it's to do with the fact that you end up really knackered, and then you're still forced to make the same decisions, and you need to be equally as sharp, because some teams are a bit more used to it, and that's the moment when they just pick to say, right, you're on your knees, now we'll accelerate. So yeah, today we didn't quite get to that stage, although I'm not sure if you may have felt it a little bit. Did you?
I made the mistake of wearing shorts, so my knees are cut up a bit.
What a mistake! Yeah,
yeah, I felt that pretty hard. If I asked you to name sort of a dream five-a-side snow rugby team based on the best players for these situations that you've played either with or against, who would you go for?
Well, the pitch is not absolutely massive, so if it was a big pitch, I'd probably go straight with your flyers from everywhere. But the pitch, and it's full contact, even though we play touch, it's full contact. So you'd have to have a serious sort of ball playing forwards, massively offloading. Defensively, it's hard work, it's slippery, so you need balance, you need grace, you need that kind of poise. So you'd have, if it's five-a-side, you'd have a couple of decision makers in there, but there'd need to be running ball players. So I guess guy I played with was Matt Gitto, very sharp as a 12, but also played as a 10 as well. So you got both of those in one player. I also played with guys like Inga Twigamala at Newcastle, someone who can run round you and through you at the same time. It's never bad to have one of those on your team. And also some smart guys that just never stop working, people like Richard Hill, I played with for England, who it didn't matter what you did to him, and Neil Back was another one. You do whatever you want, they just get up and carry on. And that sometimes can destroy an opposition's morale. So I think I'd probably have an Inga in there, a Matt Gitto, I guess I've got to be in there somewhere, a Richard Hill, Neil Back character, and then I guess you'd sort of have to have your Jonah Lomu, just for the sake of, never got to play with him, and you're kind of like, well, why wouldn't you?
Would he be the one player that you wish you really had played with at some point?
I guess to a degree there are certain, but do you know what? I'm feeling here with Dimitri Ashvili, someone I played against many, many times, and a really sort of clever and talented player. And suddenly you get a chance to play with them, and you don't even need to talk about it. You just watch them play, and you play close to them, and you chuck a ball together, and you just start to understand a bit more about them. And I think that's a beautiful thing that I was able to do in France. You play with so many players that you played against, Sonny Bill Williams, Matt Gitto, Carl Heyman, who I played with at Newcastle as well, Juan Lobe from Argentina. It was such a pleasure. Another one with Drew Mitchell, Fijian guys, just everywhere. And it's such a pleasure to do that, that you want to get inside other people's minds and see how they see the game. But when you've got a guy like Jonah Lomu, who was essentially the first global rugby superstar, who went to countries that never knew about rugby, you'd sort of look inside her head and be like, I wouldn't mind getting inside that mind and seeing what that all looked like. And fair play to him, he was an inspiration for us all, I think.
Do you think rugby's a universal language then, that it doesn't really matter where you play? You could be at Toulon in the south of France with the beaming hot sun, here in La Plagne in the snow, or like you say in Newcastle with the wind and the rain. Do you think it's a universal thing that just goes beyond that?
I think rugby goes beyond rugby. It's not that it transcends cultures. I think rugby transcends sport and goes into life, which automatically gives you every culture, because the values of inclusivity are so familiar with life that life accepts everyone as they are. It doesn't say you can have this, you can't. The wind blows on everyone. It doesn't choose to blow on some and not the other. That we all live and we all move on. Life is like that. And I think rugby treats everyone equally, in a way that you said, doesn't matter what shape you are, what you've done or what you want to do, there's a place for you, and within that place you can experience the same stuff as everyone else. You can have the same chance to progress as everyone else, and you can have the same chance to get equally as engaged. And I sort of look at that and say, but that's the beautiful message for life. So I think in a way that's why it's, I think, such a pleasurable experience for all different cultures, is that it automatically brings you home.
And in terms of the World Cup, how do you rate England's chances?
I think very good. I think England are one of maybe a handful of teams that can go there and sort of say, look, this is would you bet against England being in the semi-finals? And I've always said this about World Cups, I stand by it, that from my experience in 2007 and other experiences, is where you get to the semi-finals, anything's possible. You've seen France almost beat New Zealand in 2011 in the final. You've seen us go all the way to the final in 2007. You see games go to the wire. Teams, it's just a case of just get there. Argentina have been there, and you're sort of like, geez, they're in with a shot. Now, if you're in a place where you feel like you can make it that far, all bets are off. I think it's all about the teams that can honestly say, we can. This is not necessarily, it's never realistic or an expectation, but the way we've been living our lives for the past few years and amongst the best gives us the right to sort of go there and say, let's set our sights on getting into that stage of the tournament, and then just leaving nothing behind.
And in terms of Wales' chances, Gatland's last tournament?
Well, it's funny that people keep asking about the parallels between this England team and the England team in 2003, but in 2003 we had an unbeaten year pretty much. We won the Grand Slam, and now you look at Wales, they must be sort of mid-teens now, victories on the run. They've won a Grand Slam. That has to put them over a year unbeaten going into the World Cup. You're kind of like, now, what else do you want? So they're doing it from a position of maybe the more authentic position of an orthodox position of we're in great form, we know how to win, and we're moving into the World Cup at the right time. Other teams are doing it different ways. It really, I think the difficult thing is not so much that because a team's lost a few games, they can't feel as prepared as Wales. It's more the fact that opposition, how they respond. When you play against Wales now, you're in danger of giving them a 10-point lead purely because they're Wales. Whereas when a team has lost a few games, you go out there and say, oh, we'll have a go at this. So Wales carry, at the moment, a little bit of an aura of invincibility, the same way that New Zealand have for a long time. And unless someone dents that before the World Cup, they're going to be in great shape. As long as they keep searching for more from each other, it's going to be a good tournament for them.
Yeah, who do you predict to be the overall winners of the tournament?
I think favourites-wise, 1 and 2 in the world at the moment are where they deserve to be. I think Wales are very exciting because they're on the way up. New Zealand are holding, I think, at 1, but Wales are on the way up at 2. So I'd like to think that the seedings will ring pretty true. But I think in terms of who else is going to be there and thereabouts, England, Ireland, Scotland have a really nice dark horse going into this. Argentina always do well at World Cups, and South Africa and Australia, you wouldn't want them anywhere after the pool stage, that's for sure.
And finally, could you give us maybe one sort of under the radar player to look out for at the Rugby World Cup that maybe isn't a household name yet?
It's a difficult one, because I think if I was looking at, say for example, the England team, I see them so often, it's difficult for me to say not household players, but obviously someone like Joe Thockner-Singer is a big player we've not seen much from, and so but again it depends on the environment around him. If he comes into a team that's enjoying themselves and playing well, then he's going to go mad, but if he comes in there and he has to plug holes and he has to be under stress immediately, that's not ideal for him coming into a World Cup. So it depends on the team around them for who's going to do well, but looking at that with regard to the Welsh guys, there's no one in there that's really not well known. So I'd probably sort of I'd probably say the likes of, I was very impressed, to be fair, with Anscombe, because he didn't have an amazing start to the tournament. Quite often Biggar was coming on to replace him and doing very well. Dan Biggar's a fabulous player. He's coming on and doing well, but every time he got picked, he went out there and he got better as the games got more important. Now, I think that's an incredible skill, especially when your career up to date has been a bit, you're playing, you're not playing, you're playing, you're not playing, and people talking, you like them, you don't like them. To come on it when it really mattered and have his best game in the biggest game, for me is a nice place to be, so good for him.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for speaking to me, Jonny.
Pleasure.
All the best. Thanks very much.